Hello, my name is Michael Dale, and today I'm going to be Hello, my name is Michael Dale, and today I'm going to be reading The Disappearing Floor by Franklin W. Dixon, the Hardy Boys series, Book 19, Chapter 1, Weird Screams. "Hey Frank, isn't that the black car Dad told us to watch for?" exclaimed Jack Hardy. A sleek foreign sports car with a dented truck had just whizzed by the Hardy Boys convertible as they drove through downtown section of the Bayport. "Sure looks like it," Frank speeded up in pursuit. Dark-haired Frank Hardy, 18, and his blonde brother Joe, a year younger, had been cruising the streets on an errand for the detective father. The August evening was warm, and the boys had put down the top of their convertible. A few blocks farther, the sports car stopped for a red light. The Hardys pulled up behind the trim vehicle. In the glow of a nearby streetlight, they were able to synchronize the automobile more closely. "That must be the right car," Frank muttered. It's not likely that there'd be two of the same model in Bayport with dented trucks." The lone occupant of the sports car was the man at the wheel. He wore a dark hat, and Frank and Joe could only see the back of his head. "Did Dad give you any details on the case when he phoned?" Joe asked, as the sports car spurred forward on the green signal. Frank toed the accelerator and shook his head. "No, he didn't have any time. It was just a hurried call from New York. Mr. Hardy said that before leaving Bayport he had spotted a car like the one the boys had seen. He thought he had recognized the driver as a notorious jewel thief named Noel Strang, and he told his sons to look up the criminal's photograph in Mr. Hardy's private criminal file. The boy's father formerly was an ace detective in the New York Police Department. He had moved to the town of Bayport to open his own agency and soon had become known as the ablest private investigator in the country. Frank and Joe had inherited Fenton Hardy's detective abilities and helped him in many of his cases. The boys drove on, staying behind the sports car, which now sped into a residential area. The streets were less well lighted, but the boys were able to keep their quarry in view without tailing it too closely. "Looks like he's going to head out of town," Joe remarked. "Did you get the license number?" "Yeah, I just jotted it down at the traffic light." In a few moments, the black sports car shot out of the Bayport area. It soon disappeared from view around a bend in the road. Frank switched on his headlights, hoping to make the convertible less noticeable. But the driver of the other car seemed wary of pursuit. As the convertible rounded a bend, its driver increased in speed. The distance between the cars was widening. "He must have spotted us," Joe said. He's sure opening her up. That baby looks powerful. Good thing we had tuned up this engine last week." The convertible's speedometer needle rose as Frank gunned the engine. Slowly the gap began to close. They were approaching another bend in the road. Suddenly the car's sport exhaust belched out of a thin purple mask. "It's a smoke screen!" Joe cried out. "He's using a fogger attached to the exhaust pipe." A split second later the boy's eyes began to smart and water. "Good night," Frank exclaimed. Hastily he switched on their headlights again, but the beams could not pierce the thick pall of acrid smoke that enveloped the road. The convertible was almost out at the straight bend. Frank slammed on the brakes. Half blinded, he could only guess at the location of the white line. He spun the steering wheel and the car slewed wildly across the pavement. With a jarring thud, it came down to rest on the far shoulder of the road. "Jumpin' Jimmy!" Joe said, quivering with shock, trying to steady his nerves. Frank almost shook and drew a long breath. "Good thing there was no car coming the other way, or we'd be junked by now." "Can we risk getting back on the road?" "We better not," Frank decided. "I can see a foot away from us. If there's any traffic coming, we may be asking for a crash." Joe agreed and added, "Let's just make sure we're clear of the pavement." Clutching handkerchiefs over their noses and their tear-streaming eyes, the boys climbed out in the smoke and darkness. It was impossible to determine their exact position, but Frank checked with his foot and found that they were well off the pavement. The convertible had landed against a hillside bordering the road. Frank and Joe chafed at the delay, but there was nothing to do except wait for the smoke to clear. Meanwhile, they clambered up the hillside, coughing and choking to reach the clear air. Did you notice the smoke's color? Joe gasped. That was no ordinary smokescreen. Right, sort of a combination of smoke and tear gas. After a few minutes, the mark had dissipated enough for the boys to return to their car and swing back onto the road. Not much of a chance of finding that man now, Joe said glumly. Let's keep our eyes open anyhow. There are a few houses along here and a few turnoffs. Then we might spot the car parked somewhere. The Hardys followed the road for several miles but did not see the sports car. Disappointed they had lost their quarry, Frank and Joe turned around and headed for Bayport. Halfway back to town, they saw a flashlight being waved frantically from the roadside. I wonder if there's been an accident, Frank said. I don't see any car, Joe replied. Must be a hitchhiker. Frank slowed to check. The person who was signaling immediately jumped into the glare of their headlights. He was a chunky, round-faced youth of about their own age. Chet Norton! Joe exclaimed in surprise. The stout boy looked excited as he flagged them down. Frank braked to a halt and flung open the car door. What's wrong, Chet? Joe, Frank! Boy, what a lucky break you two happened along! Chet was puffing and trembling and looked pale. He was wearing hiking shorts and a knapsack slung over his shoulders. Just see a ghost? Frank asked as their friend climbed into the back seat. I didn't see any ghosts, but I sure heard one, Chet replied. Frank and Joe exchanged puzzled looks. What do you mean you heard a ghost? Frank said. No, just what I said. It screamed at me. Chet shuddered. Oh, it was terrible. Are you kidding? Joe put in. Do I look like I'm kidding? No, Frank said. You look like you've been scared out of your wits. How about telling us the whole story? Chet explained that he had been on the rock collecting hike. Late in the afternoon, he had stopped to eat a picnic snack, and then he dozed off. Snatch my eye, Joe chuckled. You probably stuffed yourself so full you couldn't move, and you dreamed about this ghost. All right, Chet retorted indignantly. So I like to eat, but you want to hear my story, or don't you? Go ahead, Frank urged. Well, I slept a little longer than I expected to, Chet went on, and when I woke up, it was dark. I went somewhere over the hills west of here. I had trouble finding my flashlight. Then I saw a funny-looking tiled surface. Tiled surface? Joe repeated. What do you mean by that? Chet shrugged. I don't know. What else to call it? It was like a flat, like a floor, but about 10 feet square and inlaid with little colored tiles. But the funny thing is, there's nothing else here except for trees and shrubs. The colored tiles, Chet added, formed a curious design resembling a dragon. I went over to look a closer look at it, Chet continued, and wow, out of nowhere came a horrible blood-curdling shriek. So you scrambled, I suppose, Frank said, grinning. You bet I did. That boy shrieked after me, but I didn't have a chance. I had to catch what it said. Chet's eyes bulged with fright at the recollection. I kept running till I hit a dirt lane and followed that out to this road. I was hiking home when you guys came along. Well, how about taking us back there? Joe said. You think I'm nuts? Honest, if that wasn't spook, it would have been some bloodthirsty lunatic. Oh, come on, Frank urged. Maybe it was just someone playing a trick on me. Let's find out. Chet was unwilling, but he finally gave in. He directed Frank to a dirt lane turnoff. When the Hardy Boys had passed about 50 yards back, Frank drove slowly along the lane until Chet said, Right there! Yeah, I remember that big old tree right there. Frank stopped the convertible. The boys took their flashlights out and they went up a slope which gradually flattened. The area was wooded with hemlock and cypress trees. The ground between them was overgrown with weeds and brush. There's Chet's trail, Joe said, shining his flashlight on some trampled grass. It leads over to that... A hideous scream split the darkness. Then another weaker scream, followed by a hoarse, croaking voice. The floor! The floor! It sounded like the gasp of a dying man. Chet froze in terror, but Frank and Joe immediately ran back toward the sound, playing their beams back and forth amid the undergrowth. Over here, Joe, Frank exclaimed suddenly. Joe ran over to his brother's side and saw a man lying face down on the ground. Frank turned him over gently. The man was big and balding, with thin, sandy-colored hair. The face looked deathly pale. Frank tried his pulse as Chet came lumbering up. Is he dead? Chet stammered. No, but his pulse is weak, Frank murmured. His skin feels clammy too. It looks like he's suffering from a shock. The Hardys could detect no signs of injury or broken bones. What are we going to do with him? Joe asked his brother. We better get him to the hospital. The boys carried the limp figure to their car and laid him on the back seat. Chet sat up to the front with the Hardys. Frank swung the convertible around and sped toward Bayport. As they reached a wooded area on the outskirts of town, the passenger revived and sat up. But please stop the car, he begged weakly. Frank pulled over. We were taking you to the hospital. You were unconscious, Joe added. What happened? I'll tell you in the moment, the man said. Right now, I have to lose you. I think the motion of your car is making me sick. Would you mind if I get out and walk up and down a little bit? No, go ahead, Joe said sympathetically. Chet leaned back and opened the door. As soon as the man's feet touched the door, he slammed the door. His face contorted with an ugly expression. If you boys know what's good for you, you'll keep your mouth shut about this, he snarled. I'm warning you, don't try to follow me. And he darted off into the darkness of the surrounding trees. If you want to find out what happens to Joe and Frank, make sure to keep on listening. Chapter 2 coming up.